Congratulations on getting onto the show. That had to have been
Thank you.
super exciting. So, first off, how did you become a part of it? What was the audition process like?
So the process for getting on the show was actually fairly in-depth. I was actually in the process for a different Food Network show, and that show they only need a couple of home bakers. And so ultimately they didn't choose me, which was totally fine. But then later they contacted me and asked if I wanted to go through the process for this new show, Bakeaway Camp. And of course I said yes. And so the process was I had to fill out the application, send in lots of photos of my baking, and give them my Instagram information. And then once I passed that first kind of initial round, I was given a baking kind of test. And so I had to bake 2 things with a time limit. And then I had to go on Skype with a producer to chat through what I baked. And then there were another, numbers of conversations with producers, and then eventually I was chosen.
What were the 2 recipes that you chose? Were they 2 that you were the most comfortable with, or were they kind of, well, let me just see what these are like?
They were 2. The second one had to be a cake. And so I make cakes a lot, so I'm very comfortable doing that. And then the first one, it was just to do something s'mores themed. And so, I love s'mores. I'm comfortable making things with that. So what I chose, I was pretty comfortable doing.
Are they things that we may
But
see?
I did actually. What was it?
I was going to say, are they 2 things we may see in the upcoming episodes for the show?
It is possible. The first episode does include a s'mores themed dessert, and actually I did make the same dessert that I made when I was auditioning.
Nice. How do you?
So you will absolutely see that on the show.
Awesome.
And I made what I made. It was very tricky within an hour, but I'm happy with how it came out.
Now, how do you prepare for what you're going to make? Do they let you know beforehand? This is basically the theme of the week. Go and practice, and then good luck, or is it just here you go. Here's the theme on day of.
You're kind of just giving it right then and there.
So how does that?
Yeah, it requires a lot. It requires a lot of ability to think on your toes. This whole, the show in general. You're given challenges. There's usually, curveballs. So it definitely pushes you. It pushes you creatively. Mm-hmm. You really have to get those creative juices flowing. But it pushes your ability to work under pressure, which thankfully I'm a natural born procrastinator. So I love being under pressure, for better or for worse. So I think that that was a benefit for me.
Well, how do you handle that stress? Because, it's one thing to be given the time crunch and just the curveball of this is what you're making, but also you have cameras in front of you and people are going to be watching this. So how did you handle all that?
It is stressful, but in the moment, there's plenty of adrenaline pumping. I think the run-up to challenges was much more stressful for all of us because there's a lot of unknowns, particularly with the first challenge. We hadn't done it before. So everything was new. The kitchen was new. Cameras being in front of us, that was brand new, obviously. I don't have a camera following me around regularly. So, I think there's a lot more stress before the actual challenges. Mm-hmm. But once you're doing it, there's so much adrenaline, and the time frame is very short. An hour is very short to deliver kind of a refined, elevated dish. So there's not a lot of time to stress out, truth be told. It's, afterwards that you're like, wow, I can't believe I did that in the time that I had.
Do you find yourself getting into a rhythm? I know with some people they'll say, if they're an avid runner, they just have to find their rhythm and then they're good to go. Is that kind of the same with baking, is once you find your rhythm and get into the groove, you're okay?
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree with that. I think I'm very comfortable in the kitchen. I'm very comfortable under pressure. And I think as soon as time started, I was just focused very intensely on getting my dish done. And my whole thing that I always said throughout the interview process and, throughout the challenges in the first episode were, I just need to do my best and be true to myself. And so no matter what happens, even if something came out horribly, or I had trouble with something, or the weather was complicated, we had a lot of issues with weather, my goal was to just be true to myself and to not get too stressed about what other people were doing. You'll never succeed trying to be somebody else. So I just tried to do what was best for me.
I love that. I love that saying. Because it's true. Like, you just have to be you and do your best. And I think a lot of people...
Yeah, and
go ahead.
A lot of people get stressed about trying to act a certain way or do a certain thing. And I definitely think I had moments, where I questioned myself. Everybody does, especially in an instance like this. But I think if you try to just do your best, even if you don't win a challenge or ultimately win the show, you can feel happy going home knowing that you did your best.
Was there something you learned about yourself that you weren't expecting, or a technique that you learned throughout the process of this show that you're now here and it's about to come out, that you're excited to kind of see come to life, or excited that you learned it while you were on the show?
I don't necessarily know that I picked up any new skills in particular. I think what I learned a lot was, first of all, I was very inspired by my fellow bakers. We all come from different parts of the country, have different backgrounds, different experiences in baking, and also obviously in life. And I learned a lot from them, and I was really inspired to push myself once I got home, to learn more and to do different things. But secondly, I also I learned a lot about my ability. I was just really proud, and I learned a lot about how I can handle those types of situations. Sometimes it's easy to doubt yourself, but when you're in a situation like that, you learn a lot about your ability to withstand difficult things being thrown at you, and it really shows how strong you are as a person when you come out on the other side. So I learned a lot about myself in terms of my ability to thrive, I guess, in those types of situations.
Well, now that it's over, and as I said, it's going to be premiering pretty soon, would you like to have your own eventual baking show or something in front of the camera? Or are you a little bit more content to staying with your Instagram and baking in your own kitchen with your own things?
Oh, I would love to have my own show, or at least a bakery. I have always loved baking, and I think in the back of my mind, there's always been that little glimmer or thought that I could do it someday. Of course, I do other things for a living, and I love that, and I'm good at it. But I've always thought, maybe someday I'll own a bakery, or maybe someday I'll do something with baking. So yeah, the thought's definitely there. DC is a tricky market for gaining traction with that kind of stuff. It's highly saturated, so it's a little bit harder to gain a foothold. I'm starting to actually develop some of my business plans for a home business, a cottage type business. I do it already, but it's more word of mouth, friends and family. And so I'm working on developing that further. I just ordered some business cards.
There you go. That's step one.
Yeah, exactly. But I like being in front of the camera. I hate saying that because it's kind of an awkward thing to say, but I don't mind it. I actually really like it. I am not shy. I don't get particularly nervous about that aspect of it, And there was a moment on the show where one of my camera guys, his name was GT, he was awesome. I was trying to avoid getting asked questions while I was baking. So I was just explaining what I was doing as I was baking. And he turned to me. Because I just didn't want to be interrupted. We got asked questions, periodically to be able to explain to the viewers what we were baking. So to avoid that interruption, I just was talking. And at one point, he like pulled his head out from the side of the camera and was like, "You don't have your own show yet, you know." And so then I stopped talking to the camera. But yeah, I will see. Who knows what the future will bring? For now, I'm just excited to see the show.
Well, and I'm super excited to see it. Obviously Martha Stewart is a huge name in the baking world, cooking world in general. So was she ever an inspiration to you growing up?
Yeah, I think that everyone who grows up baking knows Martha Stewart. I think we've all baked some of her recipes. We all have had some of her cookbooks or have currently some of her cookbooks on our shelves. So I've always admired her, as much for her baking as I think for her business savvy.
Mm-hmm.
She's a spectacular businesswoman, and as a woman, it's great to see other strong women succeeding in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think she's always been an inspiration for me, particularly in relation to her business as a broad stroke thing.
Did she give any of you guys any advice before the show started or while the show was going on that you kind of remember or took to heart?
Yeah, I don't know that I remember like very specific things that she said, but she gave all of us advice, periodically throughout the show, whether when she was coming around and we were talking to her, and as you know, one person goes to her house each episode
Mm-hmm.
for kind of one-on-one. So those people got that one-on-one attention. But I think she just really wanted us all to have fun and to enjoy our time there and to perhaps push our boundaries a little bit in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why she was trying to teach us tips and tricks for getting better.
That's awesome. You said it earlier that you kind of, this is your passion, but you do some other stuff. And I know, just based off looking at your Instagram and reading your profile, that you were a former member of the FBI. You now do consulting for Deloitte. So how does someone with those type of backgrounds become a baker? Where did the inspiration for all of this come from?
I have grown up baking. I come from a family of, I guess, foodies. I don't like really using that term
Mm-hmm.
in relation to like family atmospheres. But food was always an integral part of our family get-togethers. There was never a shortage of food. My grandmother, I didn't know her. She passed away when I was 8 months old rather. But she apparently was an amazing baker, and I, according to my mother, very much take after her. She would whip up like a pie before church in the morning, and she could whip up anything at the drop of a hat. So I definitely have it in my genes somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But baking's always been a creative outlet for me and a relaxation type thing. Similar to music growing up, baking and music were the two things that I used kind of as stress relievers. From school, I obviously have a lot of education and did very well in school, but that can be stressful. So baking has always been an outlet. And then when I lived in the UK for about 5 years, I was involved in a couple baking clubs.
Mm-hmm.
And, baking really became my big outlet from work. And, yeah, it's always just been a really enjoyable passion of mine.
Yeah. It's interesting to say that you hear that you were part of baking clubs in the UK and all of that, because I had the chance to live over there for a couple of months, and their whole idea of the baking is completely different. Kind of, I feel like our idea. We go for much sweeter, much kind of, I feel decadent.
Very straightforward.
So what did you get from them? What did you get over there that you really utilize now?
I honestly think it was just a passion. Brits love having a sweet something with a cup of tea.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that like, especially the cafe culture, there's always a cake under a cake stand in pretty much every coffee shop or small restaurant or cafe. And I think what I love about British baking, and I think this is why people love the Great British Bake Off so much, Although I'm a little salty that everybody loves it, 'cause I'm like, I loved you first, but fine. Let that be.
I love the Great British Bake Off. I'm not gonna lie to you.
I love it. Yeah, it's amazing. I think part of the reason people love that so much is because British baking is often, not always, more attainable, I guess, in a lot of ways. It's not terribly hard to put together like a Victoria sponge, for example, and you could whip that up fairly quickly with not a ton of experience. And I think that's kind of inspiring, and that's why, the things that I bake and the things that I post, some of them are very intricate, but I like to try to make things that people would want to make, It's like Ina Garten always says, like, she doesn't want to eat, like, fish eye soup. She wants to eat things that, like, real people eat and like and can make and that are approachable. And I think I have a similar approach to baking.
Well, that's what I love so much about your Instagram is I was looking at it earlier today, which, of course, made me hungry. But I was, like, scrolling through, and there was stuff for everyone. Your cakes, my gosh, are gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And then you had the little stuff for like pies and cookies and all this stuff. And I was like, this is for everyone, and you want it to be for everyone. So I really appreciated that, because sometimes I'll look at people's who are, avid bakers, coming into the baking world, and they'll put out this stuff that I'm just like, I cannot do that. Even if I tried, I could not do that. So looking at yours, I felt like I could do some of it.
Yeah, no, and that's, it's like you want to, especially on Instagram, you want to try to set yourself apart, of course, which is tricky in its own right. But you also want to make things that people will stop, because, what do you have, like 3 seconds or something to catch somebody's attention?
Yep.
I don't know what the science is, but there is some amount of time. It's a very short window. Where you can catch people's attention. And so you want things that both look nice, but also somebody's like, oh, I like that. Like, I could make that. Or, I remember seeing that somewhere or something like that. You want to post things and make things that are good to look at, but also potentially a little bit approachable.
Well, I guess now, since pretty much everyone is in quarantine or at home, working from home, or we're obviously going through something right now. For those who want to attempt to get into baking, do you have a recipe or a dessert or baked item that you would recommend they start with?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I actually posted recently 2 recipes. I'm getting more into posting recipes and tutorials. I've done 2 so far. I'll probably do one this weekend. I did chocolate chip cookies, which are simple, and everybody's made them, but I have some tricks that I think are kind of useful. And for those, and then biscuits. Biscuits can be tricky, but again, with the tips that I have on my stories, I think that people could easily make them. And I did it actually with my coworkers. We had like a wellness kind of lunch activity, and I did a bake-along, and they all made biscuits, and they all came out great. And so I think the big thing about baking, especially if you haven't started, is to just pick a recipe that's fairly simple, like some kind of cookie or a biscuit or brownies. Those kinds of things are fairly simple, and just do it. If it doesn't work out, you haven't wasted that many ingredients. It's not like a giant cake where you're wasting pounds and pounds of butter. You just have to dive in. And the whole thing about baking is that it's a learning process. I don't know everything. You just have to learn as you go.
I love that. At what point in your baking career did you finally realize that, you could start experimenting on your own and you weren't following recipes, or did you never even start following recipes and just kind of did your own thing?
I think it's a mix. I am always looking for good recipes, but I like to tinker. I can never leave well enough alone. That's probably a bad thing sometimes, but I think probably when I lived on my own for the first time, so probably around the same time I moved to Scotland, was when I was starting to really dive into recipes and starting to learn all sorts of things, in terms of measurements and ratios. But I still use recipes. I create some, I tinker with others. And then I have recipes that I use, like, full stop, don't bother finding anything else because I like them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a big mix.
Do you have a go-to recipe of your own or somebody else's that when you are having a tough day, this is the one that you will go home and make? It's the one that you know that eases your stress and makes you happy the most.
You know, when I come home, I usually would prefer a glass of wine over baking.
There you go.
So I don't know that I have a, like, for sure this is my recipe. I think my chocolate chip cookie recipe is pretty delicious. I actually have a couple orders for some tomorrow, and I'm happy that I found chocolate chips and I stocked up today. But I really like a good chocolate chip cookie. I don't think you can go wrong with it. I also really enjoy making, like, loaf cakes, you know, like a banana bread. Banana bread's hot right now, which is kind of funny because it's like a grandma type recipe. But when I want something simple and quick on a weekend, I will usually whip up like a good banana bread. And my grandmother has a recipe that I've tweaked that I really like.
It's so interesting to, like, hear you say all this stuff and you're just like whip it up, and I'm just like, this is amazing, because it normally takes me like 2.5 hours to bake anything, and it could be as simple as chocolate chip cookies or a banana bread. And I'm just like, I don't know if it's because I'm slow or I'm just not so, like, I analyze everything and I have to make sure that, like, it's the exact match and all of that stuff. So it's always, like, interesting to hear that, like, you know, for you, what I'm assuming chocolate chip cookies probably take like 20 minutes, like, cook, like, put together and go in the oven.
Yeah. But I think, honestly, the thing about baking is you just have to dive in and do it. It might take you longer the first time, but as you get your sea legs and you start to learn, like, what the dough would look like, the next time you do it, you'll do it better and quicker, and you'll be more confident. And so I think that's the thing about baking, is you just have to do it. And also, everybody says baking is a science, and that is true, 100% true. But it's not nearly as exact as you think it is. I don't mean that to say that you can just throw things in a bowl, you know, like, use your eyes.
Yeah.
That would probably not work out so well. You have to measure to some degree. But I think that it's not nearly as intense as people worry that it is. And so that's where I think if you're measuring, like, fluff your flour before you put it in a measuring cup. But otherwise, like, I wouldn't, people overanalyze, I think, sometimes. And it's more about gut feel, and you learn that in time.
Well, is there a recipe that still gives you a challenge to this day, or an item that you haven't attempted to make that you want to make?
Oh, there's tons of things that I find challenging. I am not perfect, and I'm always learning. I'm always trying to make new things. I think, like, genoise cakes, which are, like, kind of like sponge cakes, can be incredibly difficult to make, and I've made them successfully a few times, but they're really hard. And there's various other cakes that can cause me problems. I also don't really do fondant work. I don't like it. I like the way it looks, but I don't like the way it tastes, so I tend to steer clear of that, but I do want to learn.
I agree with your fondant comment. I like the way it looks, don't like the way it tastes.
Yeah, I just don't like it, and a lot of people don't, and so that's why I focus on buttercream, and I like it better. At some point I will teach myself fondant, or I'll take a class. It's a good skill to know, but I don't really need it right now, so I don't need to waste my time with it, or my money.
Well, you just brought up an interesting thing, like, take some classes. What are your recommendations for people who want to take classes, you know, who are starting out, and where to look for these classes?
Honestly, I know this is that, like, everybody uses, but YouTube is awesome. You can learn anything you want on YouTube, and it's almost always for free. So I would say that. I learned a lot of my baking from family and from learning, like, you know, looking at stuff online. I learned a lot from Food Network. Growing up, I always watched Food Network growing up, and I have picked up tips and tricks over the years from watching various different shows. So I would say YouTube first and foremost. There are often local places, you know, in everybody's cities that will do baking like lessons.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, start with the internet, go from there.
Did you have a go-to Food Network show growing up?
Ooh, well, when I was younger, I loved Emerald, so Emerald Live
Mm-hmm.
and Essence of Emerald, which is like going way back. Um, I have always been an Ina Garten fan from day one. I am obsessed with her. If she had been a judge, I probably would have passed out. And I know one of the other bakers, Brian, he also loves her. So the two of us were geeking out, hoping that it might be her, but it's not really her style to judge those shows.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say Emerald early on, I really enjoyed. He's also from Massachusetts originally, and that's where I'm from. So
Mm-hmm.
I think like we felt a little bit of a connection. I used to watch it with my family, and then yeah, Ina, 100%. Still to this day, Ina.
That's awesome. Well, I'm going to sneak in one last question for you because I know we're starting to get down on time. But after fans watch this show, what do you hope they get out of it and get out of your performance in it?
I hope that fans are inspired to bake. Baking's really hot right now. It's everywhere, which is particularly, well, among issues with the supply chain. It's also part of why it's hard to find flour,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people are baking and suppliers can't keep up. I hope that they're inspired, yeah, to bake. The show is really fun, and it's lighthearted, and I hope that it brings people a little bit of happiness. It's obviously a very tricky time, so I'm hoping that it gives people an outlet to be able to just like take an hour and not think about anything else except this show. So that's my goal. And as for my performance, I'm really proud of what I did, and I hope that they find me enjoyable, and that they learn something from what I bake, or if they just enjoy it. I'm not too stressed about me. It's whatever. Whatever people think about me is fine. I hope they just, enjoy the show and are able to have a bit of a time where they don't have to think about anything else.
Well, I'm super excited for them to see it, and I'm super excited to see it myself. And I want to thank you for speaking with me today.